Hello, welcome to the Week in Review. I am Muda Muj. And yes, for the second week, sitting in for Adi Darami. He's on a well-deserved rest. Our regular viewers, of course, know the score. We take 10 headline stories out of the 40 or so stories that we carried during the week. So obviously, some of them you might think they'll be important, but you know how it is. Just trust us with the 10 that we've chosen. What are the stories we have during the week? The stories we had, well, perhaps the most explosive of them was the ICC arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, and the former Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, and some Hamas members as well. This was quite a curious judgment there by the ICC. We'll go into some of the details there. And the Gambia Immigration Department said that actually they had stopped more than 100 would-be migrants from making the journey by some timely interceptions. And the National Assembly during the week underwent budget oversight training, as it were. The Minister of Finance on Friday presented to the body the budget estimates for 2025. So they've been going through the trainings to acquire the skills to properly scrutinize and analyze this very important document. And although, can we call it a minor earthquake, as it were, that happened in African politics, was the parliamentary elections in Senegal, where Pastef, a lot of people, the ruling party, a lot of people sort of were just waiting to see whether they could replicate, as it were, the popularity that they showed in the presidential elections, whether they could replicate a similar dominance in the parliamentary elections. We will go into that. And I have here with me today my colleague and friend, Ansumane Esonyasi, and of course our sign language interpreter, Lamin Sonko, to go through the stories with me. Hello, Eso. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mboch. It's a pleasure to be on this platform.
Absolutely. So now, the first story, where else to begin? The president is on a tour, the people tour. It's an 18-day tour, and on Monday he set off from Banjul, went to Barra in North Bank region, and by Wednesday was already in CRR. And next, I understand, is going to be in URR. We'll go into some of the stories there because our correspondent Usman Jatta has been with the group, with the entourage, and he's been keeping us up to speed with all the goings on.
I firmly believe that you are the ones who elected me into office, which means you hired me for a job. Therefore, I am here to visit my employers. My primary responsibility today is to listen to your concerns.
The Gambian leader also outlined plans to address the challenges in health and road infrastructure.
The electricity lines are up and the power is flowing.
So there we had the president, yes, telling them, well, he's really a servant. And he's just gone out to meet the employers who are the people. So, it started in Barra. What did you make it out? What did you make of it?
So, it's a constitutionally mandated tour, basically a requirement that's been set out by the country's constitution that he has to, at least twice in the year, go around the country and engage Gambian people. So this tour is basically to allow him to have those conversations with the Gambian people, but to also present to them his development, projects, as well as his government's policies and how these policies and the projects that his government is implementing are going to impact their lives, but also to hear from the Gambian people what their concerns and development needs are. And so I think it has been quite unfortunate that during the former regime, we've seen how the tour, to some extent, was really politicalized to some extent. So that it kind of defeated the entire purpose of it. But I think it's good that, because it's not every day that the president, gets that opportunity to engage directly with the Gambian people. So going around to some of these remotest communities, and engaging them, talking to them, but also hearing from them, I think is very, very important.
That's it. And you're saying there that unfortunately during President Jammeh's time, the whole event was politicized. Do you reckon that with this new dispensation, they have sort of washed it of that politicization?
Not completely. We've also, heard during these tours at some of these meeting grounds, statements made either by senior officials or even by community representatives that are really not the kind of messages you expect to hear at during this tour. It's, like I said, supposed to be one of policies, one of development, but you do have occasion where you would hear statements that are solely political statements, not really responding to those concerns and development needs of the people.
That's it. And one idea, one question it was actually that sort of came to mind was, okay, we know that with the tour, constitutional mandate, but I wonder the timing. I wonder what considerations, one take into account in determining when do we go. November. I wonder, are there any political calculations, as it were, that would determine when to go?
Yeah, it could be. It could be. I'm not sure if the Constitution, is quite clear as to the timing of these tours. But yeah, who knows? Maybe,
possibly not.
It's possible.
That's it. But now the crowds. What did you make of it? There was kind of ceremonious seeing off, wasn't it? Really, in Banjul, you had the officials, government officials, all lined up. And seeing off, and there was also the police band, and they all played, and the like. So they saw him off. So, but the crowds were out in Banjul, in Barra, and so far from what I've seen, CRR. What does that tell you?
Well, I think the president still enjoys that popularity, but also it's more like a tradition that has been inherited by the current regime. We used to, I remember, I'm not sure if that was what used to happen during the Sadauda days, but I know that during the Jammeh days, we had all this sending off as well, from members of the public, the army specifically. But overall, I think it shows that the president still enjoys popularity, at least to some extent.
Absolutely. I'm during Jawara's time, I think maybe because of the radically different security situation.
Right.
With Jawara's period, most things were just low key, as it were. It was just perhaps the age. But another feature is that he's been going over to the government project sites, emphasizing at every given point, the achievements, and promising more to come. And everywhere he went to, you had alcalos, chiefs, and people like the councillors. They thanked him in all of these areas for either the electricity provision, or water, or infrastructure. What did you make of that?
So I think I have to say that I was particularly impressed by his interaction with the contractor of one of the contractors doing the roads within the Nyomi area. I think it's the Hakalang Road. And you could clearly hear him really emphasizing the need for the contractor to ensure that they finish the works at the agreed time. It's like because the people need it, and so his emphasis on the people, badly needing that road, completed in time, so they're able to, so he can aid their movement. I think for me that is important. Now that for me also I think highlights the importance of the store, because it is giving him an opportunity to go and see for himself how far some of these projects that his government is implementing, are faring. And mostly we know he relies on reports, especially from his ministers, from his aides and all that. But to go there in person and see for himself, I think is important. But overall, with the government projects as well, I mean, as the head of government, it's important that he sees for himself. I think it would also aid him and government in decision making, especially as regards to some of these projects that they're implementing, particularly within the remotest villages in the country.
Absolutely, and in some of these areas, even though, yes, they sort of commended him for some of the development projects that he had initiated in the countries, but they also sort of gave their problems. They also told him what issues they had. Some areas, bad harvest, it seems like in some areas they had that, or in the schools, no chairs, and helping women to have gardens. So all of these areas, I'm quite curious, what do you make of all of these demands? Is it really for government, it must solve, they have a problem, it must be solved. But I wonder, should we always go to government to for every little thing that happens to us? Or where does the idea of community initiative come in? I wonder how you would put it, how you would frame it. But I always think along these lines, knowing that it's sort of a combination of community initiatives and government enabling. Government is really an enabler in many ways, isn't it? What do you make of it?
So government creates the environment. It creates basically the conditions, to make life easy for the citizenry. However, we also do have a role to play. It's not government really cannot provide the solution to all our problems, in as much as we appreciate that they have an important role to play in this. But you look at some of the demands that they're making, especially at venues where you've had these joint meetings, where maybe you have around 13, 14 villages, coming together and engaging the president. I think, especially with the woman who spoke about, how the school within their district, schools within their district really lack furniture. Yes. I think for me that is important. And government, of course, we know has been embarking on a lot of projects within the education sector. But to me, really living, within the Greater Banjul area, hearing a fellow Gambian, maybe perhaps in some remote village in Nyomi, complaining of a lack of furniture in schools in this day and age, I think for me, I felt quite sad listening to her. But if anything, it also shows that, we have a lot of work to do as a country. And I think we shouldn't leave it all to government as well. What can we do within, the community level as well? I'm sure if the community comes together, it would be easy for government to help. In as much as duty bearers, they have an important stake in this. It would be important for also the community to really come together and see what can we do at our level.
That's it. Yeah. And regarding this giraffe program, isn't it? They call it the Gambia Inclusive and Resilient Agricultural Value Chain Development Project, GIRAV. They've given out money in various destinations, various areas. What do you make of that? I understand that when I went to the World Bank, I think it is supported by the World Bank. Yeah. So $40 million I think involved in that, and it will go on till 2028. What did you make of sort of this show, this very public way of giving out the checks on the Meet the People tour? Did you have any sort of, were you queasy or anything? What was your reaction when you saw that?
I think for me, what government is doing is basically to say, we've had policies around, food self-sufficiency, It's more like become a mantra for this government as well to say we want by 2030 we want Gambia to be self-sufficient, right? Food self-sufficient. At the end of the day, I think presenting these checks in public, what they're doing is basically sending a message to say we said this and we're being serious about it and we're doing something about it. You look at the amount that is being given out, it's quite substantial. And I'm not sure how they would go about disbursing these funds, whether they would give them the equipment or perhaps maybe fertilizer and some other stuff. But I think if put into good use, it really would have a huge, huge impact. It would make a big difference.
Absolutely. Thank you very much there. I'm sure perhaps next week we'll have some more things to say about it because the tour is still on. It's an 18-day tour. Right. Thank you very much, Ansumana Esonyasi. Now to our next story. I think, I suppose most editors would call it the most explosive headline of the week, really. The international story regarding Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. The ICC issued an arrest warrant for Netanyahu, his former defense minister, and also some members of Hamas. But the reaction around the world. Let's just listen to this clip. A frenzy of reactions followed the court's ruling, perhaps in proportion to the significance of it. A senior international correspondent said the decision represented an earthquake on the world's legal landscape. The first time a Western ally from a modern democracy has been charged with war crimes and crimes against humanity by a global judicial body. Human Rights Watch officials said the arrest warrants break through the perception that certain individuals are beyond the reach of the law. Israeli officials have slammed the ruling, calling it absurd and false lies and anti-Semitic. Hamas, of course, welcomed the decision. The rest of the world have been falling on one side or the other, or trying to craft a studiously neutral position in circumstances where the space for neutrality has drastically contracted.
Wow.
So what did you make of it when you heard? I mean, for most of us, we were bewildered. I said, really? Yeah. How did you react?
Yeah, I mean, so the court had, I recall, since April indicated that it was considering issuing an arrest warrant against Netanyahu and some senior officials of his government, as well as some Hamas leaders. And true to their words, they did now, even though it wasn't really expected. I think initially when the threat was made, I had, believed that they were doing that with the hope that it would force the Israeli government, as well as, both sides, to really come to the table and see how to end the ongoing conflict. Unfortunately, it seemed to have escalated since then, up to this point. Now, what does this represent? I think for me, it represents a major turning point. As you highlighted in the report, this is the first time that a major, Western ally is being, issued an arrest warrant, or charged rather with war crimes. I don't think I've ever in my lifetime heard of any. And so, as regards this conflict, I think, it's a major turning point. And interestingly, some of these people mentioned, from the Hamas end, mentioned in the warrant, are no more.
Yes, for instance, Mohammed Daif.
Mohammed Daif, where we know he's no more. Yeah. So I think this also must have prompted the reaction of the Israeli government and their allies, who are saying, what's the point? I think to them it's more like you're targeting the Israelis instead, because some of these people you've named in your warrant, we know, are no more. So what's the point? But I think for me, given that both the ICC and the UN have been quite adamant in their calls for a ceasefire, I think this is more like a deliberate attempt to force the Israeli side to really, come to the table and to take these proposals for a ceasefire serious. We know that they've always maintained that they're not against the idea of a ceasefire, but it has to be based on their terms. And this includes the release of hostages, unconditional release of hostages, but also ensuring that Hamas isn't in charge of the Gaza Strip. Who is Hamas? That is the question. But it's quite a tough one. And hopefully as we progress, we would see how things would pan out. But
what about the responses? Yeah. The US, what Biden said, and the UK, the response, France, Germany, because right now they'll be in a very, very tricky situation. In fact, last night, Downing Street were forced to say something like, of course, we respect international law, and should Benjamin Netanyahu come to Britain, we were obliged, of course, to arrest him. So they find themselves in such a situation. Quite an extraordinary landscape sort of unfolding, isn't it?
I mean, there's been really divided reactions to the ICC's arrest warrant. I think for me, what I find quite interesting also is the fact that you have countries like the UK, coming out public to say, well, we respect international law, and should he come, we may be obliged to arrest him. Given the relationship between the UK and the Israelis, quite extraordinary reactions, we're saying. Interestingly, I also came across this tweet by a senior U.S. senator who also threatened, the Hague with what? Invasion. Should you go ahead with this threat, we would invade. Really quite interesting reactions we're getting. But I think for me the intention is to, force a ceasefire. We know that the Israelis also are involved in Lebanon, in Syria. So the idea basically is to, end the conflict in the Middle East, not just, in Israel or within the Gaza Strip or between Israel and Lebanon. But we see the conflict has been escalating in the past couple of months. And if something isn't done about it, I'm afraid there will come a time when the entire Middle East may be in chaos. And I think this is what the ICC is trying to avoid.
Absolutely, and it's quite interesting, isn't it? The US, UK, France, and the rest of it, when the ICC issued the arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin, they all welcomed it. Yet the very ones who are denouncing all the work that the ICC is doing about Israeli sort of accused war criminals, that's really what we need to call them.
I watched the Russian rep at the UN. This was exactly his reaction.
That's it. So now the fear is though, Trump. When he comes, that's what would he do? 20th of January is not far, and we all heard what his pick for National Security Advisor said. I have it here. You can expect a strong response to the anti-Semitic bias of the ICC and the UN, mind you, come January when Trump takes over office.
And interestingly, Trump continues to say he's very much committed to ending the war in Gaza.
And you trust Trump? Thank you very much. We can never really exhaust all the talking points of the story. Thank you very much. Now to our next story. Gambia Immigration Department, they said that essentially they had stopped more than 100 people from sort of attempting to cross this perilous seas using rickety boats to go to Europe. Why or how? Well, through some skillful, timely interventions and interceptions. Just watch this.
Now, in a recent case, we had also made another massive interception. In this case, it was done by the Gambian Navy patrol team somewhere around the Faraba Bantabolom. The Navy patrol team, as they were on their routine activities, were able to intercept a boat that had been at sea for almost about 20 good days. And migrants had been staying there, and they were looking for all efforts to have more migrants to join them in this particular boat. Now in this boat, we are able to have 91 suspected would-be migrants who were intercepted. Among these 91 would-be migrants, we were able to have 74 of them who are male, and then 12 of them are female.
Absolutely. Quite interesting there. What a battle we have in our hands. It seems there are a good number of young people who are just bent on leaving.
Right.
Never mind all the horror stories that we've been hearing.
So I have covered a few of these interceptions and have had opportunity to interact with some of these, migrants or would-be migrants. It's quite worrying, really, to see a lot of young people taking the risk, basically risking their lives. In fact, with the last interception they made, I understand the boat that they had intended to use, even from some of the people that we engaged, they were like, this boat wouldn't even be able to survive a day in the sea. So imagine, risking one's life in conditions like that. I know it's quite a broad topic and it involves a lot, but at the end of the day, is it really worth it? What can we do to change this? What can we do to improve the situation around this? But also, how do we create more opportunities for our young people? How do we, really create the conditions that would make them believe that I could make it at home, or perhaps maybe I should try the right way. We understand and we appreciate that you have a right to move, to migrate, to travel, but at the end of the day, is it really worth risking your life? And I mean, it's quite sad. For me, especially looking at the number of minors involved, the number of women involved now, it's quite scary, and I think something needs to be done about it.
Absolutely, but this is the key, though, isn't it? We need a transformation in sort of mindset, isn't it? But that's a longer-term issue, isn't it? But in the short term, and we've said it here, myself and Ade, these interceptions, making it extremely difficult physically being there on the seas, on the high seas, isn't it? In the short term, maybe these are the tactics, the strategies that might help as well. Which led me to the next question. Okay, after you've intercepted the boats and you've got these 100 people, now what next?
So what they would do is they're processed, and what this involves is just basically taking their details. And then they're released. So the only people who perhaps would pay the price for this, or would end up being prosecuted, would be the agent who goes around looking for people, collecting money from them, and the boat owner. So what they've also done, I understand the immigration has also initiated this now, where they go around and have all the boats registered. So if they come across any boat with suspected would-be migrants, they look at the boat number, and so they can easily trace who owns the boat, and once they get the individual, they would be able to know who the agent is, like the people involved in this, and those are the ones they prosecute. But for the would-be migrants, the people who are in this, they're released. They just take their details, your name, where you're from, and basically just those normal, regular details, and you're released. Yes,
and in one of these operations, they said that they had apprehended 7 perpetrators, agents and the captain. So this is the key. And another important thing said then was, well, he called it intel from Senegal. I think, I suppose he means intelligence. Getting intelligence from Senegal. But this is a key, isn't it? We can really approach this as a group.
Sure.
Given the proximity, the extreme proximity of the two countries.
In fact, of the 3 most recent interceptions they made, majority of these would-be migrants are Senegalese nationals.
Yes.
And so I think this affects the region more than in other parts of our continent. You look at the number of migrants that make this risky journey to Europe from within West Africa compared to other parts of the continent. I mean, it's really massive. And so you have a lot of Gambians, Senegalese, Guineans, Nigerians involved in this. Even with the recent interceptions they made, I think the PRO had mentioned something like over 60% are all Gambian and Senegalese nationals. And so if they can really work together and share intelligence, I think it would help a lot.
Absolutely. I think with East Africa, the problem they have there is people taking these boats in similar circumstances, but to go to the Middle East. They get more to the Middle East from East Africa than with us. We want to go to Europe, given the geography, isn't it? We can go to the Canary Islands. Thank you very much there. So now to our next story. A group of medical doctors from Spain called Surgeons in Action in the country offering free surgeries of hernia, surgeries on hernia, and goiter. Here, let's just listen to the administrator of the Kanifing General Hospital, Babukar Sen, to tell us more why they are significant in being here.
In our surgical department, in our surgical outpatient department, we have a long queue of patients, a backlog of patients that need elective surgeries. And with their coming, it will significantly reduce the backlog of surgical cases, and it will also reduce the waiting time. And the good thing is that these surgeries have been done safely, with zero complications, and also at no cost to the patients or to the community. So we're indeed very grateful as a hospital, and we intend to continue this kind of collaboration. The unique thing about this collaboration is that it's an opportunity for our own service providers to learn from them, but they also learn from us as well. And usually when they leave behind some drugs and other supplies which we use to help other patients as well.
Absolutely. So Surgeons in Action, they've been coming over for 2 years. Now I understand that over the 2 years, they had conducted more than 700 surgeries on either hernia or goiter.
Yeah, I mean, I think it basically shows, that the relationship between our two countries continues to grow from strength to strength, but especially within the medical field. So the Spanish government has, over the years, had series of interventions in the medical sector, from supplying, from donating drugs to medical equipment, and now bringing over, doctors. The fact that they're offering these very complicated surgeries at no cost to the ordinary Gambian, I think that alone for me is enough. And it's highly commendable, really. He mentioned that when they leave behind the equipment and drugs and all that. I think that too is important. But also you look at the opportunity that it creates for our health professionals who, would be maybe perhaps lucky to work with them during the time, that they would be around. I think it's important. It would help those health professionals, but it would also help us. We know certain drugs are a problem here, and really access to some of these highly complicated surgeries also is a problem. It's either you may not have the money to have these surgeries, or you may not have a specialist in that area. So it's important, and I think it's highly commendable.
Absolutely, and there when we listen to Babukar Sen in the report, he says something like, the good thing about this party being here is that they have a backlog.
Yeah.
of people who need surgeries. They call it elective surgeries. These are the non-emergency ones that are scheduled in advance and stuff like that. But again, absolutely, this is the key, isn't it? This charitable action, very good, helpful, but it reminds you of how far back you are in creating for your own, and in the end, really, that's the only sustainable way of providing health care for our situation.
Indeed, I mean, in as much as we appreciate the gesture, but I think, I mean, as you highlighted, it shows that, you know, we also really need to double up. We cannot continue to rely on the benevolence of our friends. They also have other priorities. And what if it gets to the point where they are unable to offer, I mean, these services? Again, what do we do? So we should always be prepared for occasions like that. And the only way to go about it is to ensure that you work on these things. Wherein you have challenges, you work on them. I remember back in high school, our government teacher would say, you know, it's never bad for governments to build schools everywhere, but how about ensuring that there is quality, you know, within the education system? Let's emphasize on quality, but for the schools that we have as well, we make sure that whatever the school needs, be it for the student or the teacher, so that you have that, you know, very friendly learning environment is available. It's like having an empty classroom, you know, or maybe a classroom, but you don't have furniture. I mean, it definitely would show at the end of the day in either the results or the quality you would need wouldn't be there. So, yes, we appreciate the gesture, but for how long we continue to rely on the benevolence of our friends? And as much as we appreciate, something has to be done as well.
Thank you. So what's the exit strategy? Wow. That's a story for another time. Now let's go to our next story, halfway point. The National Assembly, they went through training on budget oversight. Let's just listen to this clip.
This is a very crucial part of your legislative responsibilities, one that directly impacts the lives of people and the future of the country. The budget is not merely a financial document, it is a statement of our national priorities. As members of Parliament, you are stewards of public trust.
That was Ms. Jane Bufai, Country Director for International IDEA, the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance. So, but they've been receiving trainings, haven't they? The National Assembly, way back since they came into the body, into the Assembly. They've been receiving various trainings, haven't they? Capacity building at every stage of the way, provided by one sponsor or another. What do you make of it?
Quite interesting. I mean, it's one of their main functions is to perform oversight, right? So as regards to the budget, yes, we appreciate. But I think for me, this should really serve more as a refresher for them, and not necessarily training. It's part of their job. However, I know they also do have.
Didn't Gambia participate?
Yeah, I mean.
So I think they did something like about the budget, the training.
They've had quite a couple of trainings, such as this one. So I also do know, I'm aware that they do have closed door sessions with various public institutions that are catered for within the budget, and the whole idea is to help them in their oversight functions, so that by the time it is brought to plenary, it's easy for them to deal with it, because already by then they would have known what is there and what is it that these institutions need. So that's why I'm saying for trainings like this, I think it should be more of a refresher for them. But the budget is perhaps the second most important national document for me, apart from the Constitution, because it basically spells out how government intends to really
Spend our money.
And this is important. And so to have the very people who are responsible for looking after or looking at how government is spending that money, being, equipped with all the necessary, be it information or skills to be able to do that, isn't bad. I think it's good.
Thank you very much. Good place to end the first round, if we can call it that, the first period. Now we're going to go for a short break.
Introducing the Q-Smart and Q-Smart Plus, where innovation meets affordability. Capture life's precious moments with stunning clarity thanks to our high-resolution cameras. Enjoy uninterrupted performance with a fast processor and a long-lasting battery that keeps up with your day. The Q-Smart offers a 5.9-inch immersive display, powerful performance, and an all-day battery life, all for just $3,400. Plus get an incredible bundle of 15 gigabytes of data, 120 minutes of talk time, and 300 SMS absolutely free. Upgrade to the Q-Smart Plus featuring a faster processor and extended battery life and a larger 6.5-inch screen for just $4,000. With it, you receive a massive 30 gigabytes of data, 300 SMS, and 120 minutes of talk time completely free. All bundles are spread across a 3-month period. Don't miss out. Get your Q-Smart or Q-Smart Plus from QCell today. Discover the best in quality and value right here in the Gambia. Available at all QCell customer care centers across the country. For more information, call 111. QCell's the new boss. We innovate, others follow.
Hello, welcome back to the Week in Review, where we take 10 headline stories and go into some depth with all of them. We've already done 5 more to go. And my guest here, my friend and colleague Asmani Nyasi, and our sign language interpreter, Sankom, helping me going through the stories. Now to our next story. The Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Welfare launched a gender policy during the week. Here, let's just listen to the minister.
This policy framework reflects the government's vision of a powerful and peaceful, prosperous Gambia in which men, women, boys and girls have equal rights and opportunities to develop and thrive. While it aims to eliminate gender disparities in education, reduce maternal mortality, improve reproductive health services, and promote gender-sensitive health care.
Yes, there we just heard the Minister of Gender, Children and Social Welfare, Fatou Kinte. The aim is to eliminate gender inequality. Ooh, that's a tall order, isn't it? Given our performance so far.
Yeah, indeed. So this is what to last for
2025, 2030,
yeah,
I think something
2030,
like that,
yeah.
Yes.
For about 5 years.
No, actually, they've got the gender policy is
2025,
2034.
2034.
Exactly.
That's for like 9 years, and the other one is for 5 years.
Yes, that's the National Women's Council.
Right.
Yeah, that's from 2025, 2030, I think.
So it's good to have really a document that would provide, the framework, basically, the strategies for some of these targets that government has. But I think for me it also shows, a commitment really by government to deliver on some of these, promises. Of course, there have been promises made over the years, but to have a strategy really that clearly spills out how government intends to go about closing that gap, that inequality gap between, men and women, but also ensuring that young girls and boys, are given the required, environment really for them to be able to thrive, I think is important. I listened to the president's statement as well at this event, and he really did make a case for women to say, you know, there has to be, we just shouldn't be talking about these things now. We have to really be seen doing something about it, and so I hope that this wouldn't be just some other, you know, document that is being launched and that's it. You know, I hope really that something would be done to ensure that the objectives for which it was developed and launched for would be achieved.
So isn't the bigger question is that the Gambian people are really ready? Remember what happened in the National Assembly. And when it comes to representation in the National Assembly, in Africa, we're below average.
Right.
So it's a matter of whether Gambian people are really ready. Because if that can happen in the National Assembly,
right,
should we take it that because they represent us, then therefore it is reflective of how most of us think?
I think.
So you need to bring your society. Society must be ready for certain changes before you can really see them, don't you think?
I mean, you're quite right. But also, I think this is a challenge for government too, going forward. You look at, I mean, you mentioned the National Assembly, but you look at even cabinet, right? And you look at some of these, you know, public institutions we have. You look at the leadership there, it's dominated by men. And so that's why I said it's important, because it also challenges government now going forward. And so it would be interesting to see how, you know, they would go about implementing the strategies they have in these policies.
Thank you very much so for your views. Now to our next story. During the week, we marked World Children's Day. On November 20th, 1959, the UN General Assembly adopted the Declaration of the Rights of the Child. That's the reason why 20th of November has been designated World Children's Day. Let's just take a listen.
In the Gambia and across the globe, this day calls on all of us, government, UN agencies, development partners, civil society, private sector, service providers, politicians, and most importantly, families, to work together to better fulfill children's rights.
Yes, so this has been a long-running topic, hasn't it?
Right.
Really, from sort of trying to keep children off the streets. You know, some of these kids who were taken to teachers,
right.
Then you have Arabic Quranic teachers, some of them the unscrupulous ones, sending them out to go and beg. Well, it was part of the culture. It's only afterwards that we thought it was wrong.
It was wrong.
When we were growing up, not many people thought that these things were wrong, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
So, but this is the state of children. What do you feel? Maybe if you take, I don't know, 5-10 year trajectory, we are moving in the right direction. I mean, it seems slow,
yeah.
But how do you see it, our trajectory now with children's rights?
I think we've made quite a lot of progress. I remember when I was in primary school, there was corporal punishment, right? Now you don't have that anymore. And also, you hardly see children around begging in the streets compared to before. Of course, we still have that happening, but not as, you know, it used to be. And so I think we've made progress. It's gone to the point where even your own child, you know, you would really have to think twice before, you know, before you punish them, because you know what will happen if you know, you're reported, or maybe if it gets to the point where, you know, some authority is aware of it. And I think we've made progress in that respect, even within the education sector as well. Mm-hmm. There are communities now where you have a lot of young people who are enrolled in schools. Maybe 30, 20 years ago, the schools weren't a priority, you know, for children in those areas before. So we've made some progress, and I appreciate that, you know, you have people still, you know, making calls, you know, for respect for children's rights, but also to ensure that children are given the opportunities, but also the right environment for them to grow you know, in the way that we all expect. So yes, it's good, and you know, the manner in which the celebrations are done as well. When I was in primary school, you know, we would be involved in various activities. I see that happening now, but it's different from what, you know, the way things were done when we were much younger. But at the end of the day, I think it's important that we continue to make these demands, that we continue to advocate for children's rights, and hopefully with still some of these challenges we have, you know, with time we'll be able to, you know, surpass them.
Thank you very much there, Sir Yasser. Now to our next story. Senegalese politics after their landslide victory in the presidential elections. Pastef, everybody was watching to see what would happen in the parliamentary. Let's listen to this.
This victory now gives President Bassirou Diomaye Faye a strong mandate to implement his social and economic reform agenda, on which he was elected in March. According to observers, the vote was conducted peacefully across the country, although there were periodic clashes between supporters of different parties in the run-up to the elections. Pastef needed 83 seats for a majority in the 165 National Assembly, something they have exceeded according to the results announced so far. The country's main opposition leaders, including former President Macky Sall, leader of the Takuwale coalition, have conceded defeat and congratulated President Bassirou Diomaye Faye on his party's victory.
That was our correspondent, Aliou Cissé.
Yeah.
And were you expecting this? The
Yes.
margin of victory, 130 out of 165, the seats, number of seats, I think, they had secured by Pastef.
So I was expecting Pastef really to, you know, have the majority in parliament, but not, you know, this much, really.
Overwhelming, it
yes,
seems.
overwhelming, really. But again, this was the whole idea. The reason for dissolving parliament was because they were struggling to implement some of these policies they had. And so we know that you would need parliament's approval to be able to do certain things in government. And so, yes, they won the presidential elections, but remember that parliament was dominated by the now former ruling party. And so, given the relationship, we know the relationship between these two parties as well. And so they were struggling. On 2 occasions, they would have stuff sent to parliament, not approved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Diomaye Faye was very smart. He said, all right, that's how you want to play it. Let's go to the country. They will decide. And it seems that's really what happened here. But for me, what I'm thinking is that you had Abdoulaye Wade, Macky Sall, and Idrissa Seck, and others, the old guard.
Yeah.
They came together. So this is quite interesting. It seems that Senegal have really said to the old guard, that's it, enough is enough.
Right.
So maybe this new cadre of politicians, so it will herald a new era in Senegalese politics.
Indeed.
Gone with the old guard.
Yeah, I mean, I think it started from the presidential elections.
Yeah.
I mean, in as much as Pastef at the time was really a major force, but you look at, I mean, when President Sall was leaving, he was still quite popular. His then Prime Minister was also quite popular. And they were the incumbent, the ruling party. But the people decided, you know what, we want change. And they went for the youngest candidate. And then we've seen even in the parliamentary elections as well, majority of the candidates they had were young people. So indeed, it's a new era for them. But I think it's a challenge as well for the ruling party. Now that you have total control, you have majority in parliament, majority in government, you're literally in charge now. And I'm sure it's going to be a challenge for them here against the next elections in Senegal, next electoral cycle. So it is now up to them to prove themselves. They have what it takes to implement their programs. In parliament, they have the majority there as well. So they're literally in charge. And so we can only wish them luck.
Do they have what it takes? I mean, the English do say that be careful what you wish for. It might come true.
Yeah, and that's the challenge.
That is really the challenge now, isn't it?
Sure.
The sort of revolution, if you like, that they want to effect in Senegal, the radical agenda of severing relationships with the mother country, as we used to say it, France, and the contracts. The government contracts, how do you renegotiate them? So you've got all these forces, international forces, if you like, nudging you in one direction or another. Now you are in government. Right. In opposition, you can say pretty much what you like, but once you come in, then you realize that there are certain practical restraining factors that you have to deal with, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And I think they've been quite bold. Especially with the renegotiation of contracts. You look at some of these contracts, these are major contracts. But also, I saw in the news last week that they're reclaiming even land allocated to some of these, big investors, who've been in the country for some time. So I think they have really the drive to kind of go on to levels that we may not even think they would with their revolution.
History will tell.
Challenge for them. It's a challenge for them.
Thank you very much, Ansumane Sonyasi, and thank you very much, Lamin Sonko. We've come to the end of the program this week, and thank you very much to our viewers. All till next time, I'm Mamadou Mbodj. Goodbye.